The year is 1945. World War II has ended, and a spirit of hope sweeps across America. In the small coal mining town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, families are preparing for a peaceful Christmas. For the Sodder family, headed by Italian immigrant George and his wife Jennie, this Christmas Eve was special. They were a prominent family, known for their 10 children and successful trucking business. Despite George's outspoken criticism of Mussolini's fascist regime, which had caused some friction, they had built a comfortable life and were looking forward to a joyous celebration. But as the town slept, a nightmare was unfolding. Around 1 a.m., a strange phone call woke Jennie. An hour later, she was woken again by the smell of smoke as a ferocious fire tore through their home. George and Jennie, along with 4 of their 9 children present that night, escaped the inferno. In the frantic chaos outside, they realized with dawning terror that 5 were still trapped in the upstairs bedrooms. Panic set in as George's desperate rescue attempts were thwarted. His ladder was missing. His work trucks, which he planned to use to reach the windows, inexplicably wouldn't start. 14-year-old Maurice, 12-year-old Martha, 9-year-old Louis, 8-year-old Jennie, and 5-year-old Betty were never seen again. The fire department arrived hours later, by which time the house was only ash. The official explanation was swift. The children perished in the blaze, and death certificates were issued. But for George and Jennie, this felt wrong. When the rubble was searched, investigators made a baffling discovery that would haunt the family forever. There were no human remains, no bones, no teeth, not a single trace. Experts would later confirm that even intense house fires almost always leave skeletal remains behind. How could 5 children vanish from a burning house? This question ignited a lifelong, desperate search for answers by their parents. They refused to believe their children were dead. Was it a tragic accident, or was the fire a deliberate act of arson, a cover for a calculated kidnapping rooted in a dark secret from George's past? The strange events of that night, the missing ladder, the disabled trucks, the odd phone call, pointed towards something far more sinister. This is the chilling, unsolved mystery of the Sodder children. In the small, tight-knit coal mining town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sodder family was a picture of the American dream. George Sodder, an Italian immigrant who arrived in the U.S. at 13, had built a successful trucking business from the ground up. He was known for being hardworking, but also for his strong, outspoken opinions, particularly his fierce criticism of Italian dictator Benito Mussolini, a stance that earned him some enemies in the largely Italian-American community. He and his wife Jennie were raising 10 children in their large, 2-story timber frame house. On Christmas Eve, 1945, the home was alive with festive cheer. The older children had been allowed to stay up late after Marion, the eldest daughter, had returned from work with new toys for her younger siblings. Around 10 p.m., with the younger children eager to play, George and Jennie retired for the night, assuming the older ones would soon follow. But the peace of the holiday was about to be shattered. Around midnight, the phone rang, jarring Jennie from her sleep. On the line, an unfamiliar woman's voice asked for a name she didn't recognize. Then came a burst of strange, clinking laughter from the background before the line went dead. Jennie, unsettled, dismissed it as a bizarre wrong number, but she also noticed that downstairs, the lights were still on and the front door was unlocked, both highly unusual. Shrugging it off to the children's late-night festivities, she returned to bed. Just an hour later, she was jolted awake again, this time by the thick, acrid smell of smoke. Jennie raced out of the bedroom to find smoke pouring from George's office. The fire seemed to be centered around the telephone line and the fuse box. Panic erupted. She screamed for George, who immediately began rousing the children sleeping downstairs. Their large wooden home, a source of pride, was now acting like a tinderbox, the old timber frame quickly becoming engulfed in a raging inferno. In the chaos, George and Jennie managed to escape with 4 of their children, 23-year-old John, 17-year-old George Jr., and 19-year-old Marion, who had grabbed the youngest 2-year-old Sylvia from her crib. They stumbled out into the freezing night air, the snow crunching under their bare feet, but their momentary relief was instantly shattered by a horrifying realization. As the parents frantically counted heads against the roaring orange blaze, the numbers didn't add up. A frantic head count confirmed the worst. 5 of their children, 14-year-old Maurice, 12-year-old Martha, 9-year-old Louis, 8-year-old Jennie, and 5-year-old Betty, were still inside, trapped in their attic bedrooms on the 2nd floor. A primal, desperate panic took hold of George. He scrambled back towards the house, smashing a window with his bare hands to try and re-enter, badly cutting his arm in the process. But a solid wall of fire and smoke drove him back, searing his lungs. His thoughts raced to the heavy ladder he always kept propped against the side of the house for just such an emergency. It was inexplicably gone. A frantic search revealed it had been thrown into a steep embankment over 75 feet away. Undeterred, George ran to his 2 large coal trucks, hoping to drive one up to the house and climb on top to reach the attic windows. But mysteriously, neither of the vehicles, which had been working perfectly just the day before, would start. The engines turned over but refused to catch. Every logical rescue attempt was thwarted by a bizarre, almost calculated failure. Marion ran to a neighbor's house to call the fire department, but the phone line there was also dead. Another neighbor who saw the blaze tried to call from a nearby tavern, but the operator wouldn't connect. Finally, someone got through, but the fire department, located just 2.5 miles away, was inexplicably slow to respond. Powerless and defeated, the family could only watch in absolute horror as their home was consumed. In just 45 minutes, the entire structure collapsed into its foundation, leaving nothing but a smoldering, ash-filled basement as dawn broke on a tragic Christmas morning. When firefighters arrived, it was already too late. The strangest part? No remains of the children were ever found. Experts said bones should have survived a fire, but there was nothing. No bones, no ashes, nothing. If the children weren't in the fire, then where did they go? In the aftermath, as the initial shock subsided, Jennie Sodder's profound grief began to curdle into a chilling suspicion. The official explanation of a tragic accident felt hollow, a flimsy story that couldn't contain the weight of her loss. A string of strange occurrences from that night began to replay in her mind, each one a sharp, dissonant note in the symphony of horror. It started just before the fire, with the shrill ring of the telephone. A woman whose voice she didn't recognize asked for a name she'd never heard, followed by what sounded like a strange, mocking laugh in the background. Jennie, annoyed, had dismissed it as a simple wrong number, but when she later ran to that same phone, desperate to call for help as flames devoured her home, the line was completely dead. This was no coincidence. A telephone company repairman later confirmed her worst fears. The line hadn't just failed, it had been deliberately and cleanly cut high up on the utility pole. Someone had wanted them utterly alone, sealed off from any hope of rescue. Then there was the family's heavy-duty ladder. George always, without fail, kept it propped against the side of the house, a permanent fixture of their daily life. Yet, in the frantic, smoke-filled moments of the fire, it was inexplicably missing. Its absence was a gaping hole in their reality, denying them their only direct route to the children's second-story bedrooms. The ladder was later discovered, not just misplaced, but tossed contemptuously into a roadside ditch 75 feet away, as if discarded after serving a sinister purpose. Desperate for any alternative, George, a man who ran his own trucking business and knew his vehicles inside and out, tried to start his 2 large coal trucks. He planned to drive them to the house and climb atop them to reach the windows. But both vehicles, which had been running perfectly just the day before, suddenly wouldn't start. They were dead, refusing to turn over. It was too much to be bad luck. It felt like a calculated, multi-pronged attack, a systematic dismantling of every chance they had. The clues, once assembled, pointed away from a random tragedy and towards something far more sinister, a targeted assault. George Sodder, an Italian immigrant who had arrived in America in 1908, was a man of strong convictions. He was fiercely and vocally critical of Benito Mussolini's fascist regime, a dangerous stance in a community where loyalties were often complex and divided. His outspokenness had made him enemies. This wasn't just paranoia, a specific threat now echoed in his memory. Weeks earlier, a visiting life insurance salesman had become aggressive when George rebuffed his offer. The man had sneered that George's anti-Mussolini remarks would get him in trouble, warning him that his house would go up in smoke and his children would be destroyed. At the time, George had dismissed it as the angry bluster of a failed salesman. Now, it felt like a prophecy fulfilled. Was this a targeted act of political revenge? Many in the community suspected the local Sicilian Mafia, perhaps acting as enforcers for fascist sympathizers, was involved in silencing him for good. But it was the official investigation, or lack thereof, that pushed the Sodders toward their most unthinkable theory. The fire chief conducted only a cursory search of the ashes before declaring the fire an accident caused by faulty wiring. A conclusion the Sodders knew was false, as they had recently had the entire house professionally rewired. Most disturbingly, the search yielded no human remains. Not a single bone fragment, not a tooth, not a shred of physical evidence from the 5 children who had supposedly perished there. Jennie, in her grief, refused to believe it. She consulted with a crematorium employee who confirmed that a 2-hour house fire, however intense, would not be hot enough to completely obliterate human bones. The absence of evidence wasn't evidence of absence, it was evidence of something else entirely. A new, horrifying narrative began to form in their minds. The fire wasn't the tragedy itself, but a cover-up, a loud, chaotic diversion for a crime beyond comprehension. That the children had been taken from their beds that night, and the blaze was set to hide the abduction, to erase them from existence. Witnesses claimed to have seen the children. One said they watched the fire from a car parked nearby. Another spotted them at a hotel the next morning. Years later, a photo arrived in the Sodders' mailbox. It showed a young man who looked almost identical to Louis. On the back, a cryptic note, but the clue led nowhere. The Sodder family never gave up hope. They put up a billboard along Highway 16 pleading for answers. That sign stood for nearly 40 years, a haunting reminder of their missing children. But the truth never came. Were the Sodder children taken that night? Was the fire a cover-up, or were they truly lost in the flames? More than 75 years later, the mystery remains unsolved. What do you think really happened? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy mysteries like this, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more.